we welcome Michele Thatcher to the show. Michele, thanks so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm very good. Nice to be here.
Yes, definitely. Well, we appreciate you making the trip. What is your favorite superpower?
So I thought long and hard about this, and I was going to do one that was kind of good for the world and other things. But honestly, my superpower would be being able to work while I'm driving in the car. So much time I spend in the car, so much time, or transportation, even on planes, just being able to work. As it is, I get car sick. I just feel like it's wasted time unless I'm listening to podcasts, which is another good thing.
Okay.
But can't really do work. So it'd be being able to work and transport myself at the same time.
I was an assistant for a while, a writer's assistant for a while in LA. And my boss, at first I thought that he had, some of what I did was driving him around, and we would go to meetings, and then I would take notes in the meetings and so forth, talk with the rest of with his team afterwards. And at first I figured, okay, he's going to be working while he's in the passenger seat. But he would just kind of sit there, and we weren't talking, but he seemed kind of zoned out. And then I realized he actually was working while we were in the car. He was writing scenes in his head.
And being able to really do good work and then transport them back. Well, There you go.
So
something like that would be very helpful.
That's how he accessed his superpower. Like, does it make sense for a company to hire a driver for an executive so that the executive can work while they're on the road?
I think that at some point, especially in places where there are long commutes, makes sense. I started off the very first partner that I worked for when I was a law school intern. That's what I did. I actually drove him to deposition from Atlanta to Greenville, South Carolina. He was getting ready for depositions, and he would just talk to me out loud and say, this is what I'm going to try to do. And I think he was prepping and I was driving. The nerve-wracking thing was he had this really nice Jaguar, and I was so nervous about wrecking the car that I really wasn't learning all the great things I could have learned from him, because I just kept focusing on really tightly, holding on to the wheel, saying, I cannot wreck this man's car. It will be the end of my career. So it was a very stressful. So being a driver can be stressful too if you're doing that.
No question.
Absolutely.
No question. Where did you grow up, and what did your parents do?
So we moved probably 8 times before I was in junior year in high school. So a lot of moving around. But when we ended up moving to Dallas when I was a junior in high school, and I've never left. So I think that tells you how much moving, how able I am to change. But my dad was in sales, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I was kind of blessed to learn a lot from both of them. The sales helps a lot in my legal career. And my mom was kind of the balance of the family, still is the balance of the family today. So it was a really great mix having both of them.
Nice. What was your first job?
So my first real job was coming out of law school. And I started with a firm in Dallas, and I was a labor and employment lawyer. And in that first real job, one funny story, as you come out, I came out and I'm like, I'm going to be, at that time, and I'm aging myself, it was LA law, right? I was in litigation. I was going to have that very, moment in the courtroom that was just going to change the whole course of the trial. I mean, just a couple of years out of law school. I mean, never was going to do that. But my first moment was we were in Houston picking a jury, and we were going through the jury pool, and the judge asked, does anyone know any of the lawyers? Because if you do, you've got to, you can't be in the jury pool. And this wonderful little woman stands up and starts screaming. She goes, Michele Thatcher, I recognize you. Aren't you so-and-so, a friend of Susie? And just tells this whole lifelong story about knowing my mom. Everyone in the jury is like, who is this person? Who is this guy? My partner was just horrified. Yeah. And the trial just went downhill from there. At one point, then I was just nodding so much, the judge was like, Miss Thatcher, you must stop nodding in my courtroom. The jury's going to make its own opinion. It was just like the failed first trial. So after that, I kind of felt like all I could do is go up from there as a trial lawyer, because it couldn't get any worse.
That's nice. So give us 60 seconds on your career road from there.
Easy. Coming out of A&M in accounting, I went to SMU Law School, practiced law with a private firm, and made partner at a firm called Baker Botts, and then went to PepsiCo, and I'm on my 24th year at PepsiCo. And in that company, I've done a lot of interesting things, but kind of the fun part was going from being in the legal department to leading the HR function for Frito-Lay. And then coming back to leading the global labor and employment group and serving as chief human rights officer, which is what I do right now.
Okay. It sounds like your career evolution just happened pretty organically from there.
It did. I think the big aha for me was, I was an accounting major at A&M in the business school. And my summer of my junior year, I interned with Arthur Andersen. Had a great time with all the people, but found accounting really boring. And so I came back as a senior. I had an offer, and much to my parents' dismay, were like, they're going to pay you big money and a great job. And this is exactly what you work for. I said, I think I'm going to go to law school and I'm going to spend big money for 3 years and then hopefully make that money. So,
instead of them giving me money, could I give someone else a lot of money?
Exactly. 3 years worth of it. So, then, I did have a fun conversation with my father many years later where, if I said, Dad, if I'd taken that Arthur Andersen job, might not have worked out so well unless I'd pumped over to Accenture, because the rest of my friends that went to work for Arthur Andersen all found other jobs later.
Right.
So it's kind of, again, you never know the twists and turns that life's going to throw out there with you.
No question. Undoubtedly, we have students who might be surprised that a large company has a chief human rights officer. What does a human rights officer do at a large corporation?
Well, it's actually a really new job for most companies to have in place. And, I think holistically what the role does is it kind of looks across the whole business. So from the beginning of the supply chain to the end of the supply chain, and just looks to say, how are we treating people? At its real basic level is is everybody in our business being treated fairly? Are they being paid a fair wage? Are they, are their health and safety standards being abided by? Is there no discrimination going on somewhere in there? I mean, and I think that, as companies look to the fact that you've got to look outside just your four walls nowadays. I mean, I think it's always known, hey, we take care of our employees. That's kind of, to me, that's table stakes. It's when you look outside that and say, again, for a company like PepsiCo, how are the farmers that grow the corn that goes into our Fritos, how are they being treated? How do they treat people that work on the farms, right? How do our third-party suppliers that may be manufacturing the plastics used in our bottles, how are they treating the employees that work there? So from a human rights perspective, I really look towards, holistically, how are people treated anywhere in our supply chain? And you work kind of hand in hand in companies, most of the times with the sustainability officers, right? That are looking at environmental questions and other things like that again. So I think what you see in general today is companies really just, again, looking outside the four walls of just what they can control to those outer circles of their supply chain and trying to influence where you can for the good.
Then it seems like this, in the Venn diagram of kind of how the company works, this is sort of an intersection between human resources and ESG, or?
Exactly.
Okay. And
you throw in a little health and safety there for good measure. And what's interesting is the people that most impact outside of the supply, your direct four walls, maybe your global procurement people, right? Or your logistics people, think of supply chain management, things like that. Those are the individuals we spend most of the time in the company talking to, because they're the ones that are dealing with those third parties. Whereas our human resources, they deal primarily with the people that are, again, our employees at PepsiCo. So, again, the cool thing about the role is you reach across a lot of different functions within the company.
Yeah, that makes sense.
To try to influence, having kind of, again, very little, because there's so many different, suppliers that touch the supply chain. What you're trying to do is really build capability, for example, in your supply chain management folks, so they know what to look for and the questions to ask, because they're the eyes and ears. Our team is really only just a couple of folks. So it's not like a huge, we influence by trying to influence the business partners.
That's great. I love that. One of your colleagues said about you, she embodies the perfect balance between working really hard and yet never losing track of who and what really matters. And that's the people around you, the way you treat them, and the relationships you build. This hasn't always been an easy road for you, though. Your kids, for example, once trolled you over store-bought cookies. Tell us that story.
They absolutely did. And I would tell you, there is no perfect balance. So whichever of my wonderful friends and family said that, I think they were maybe mocking me a bit with the perfect balance.
Okay.
But I think the challenge for men and women today and that are working outside the home is trying to find that work-life balance. And for me, I have two kids, Josh and Alex. And growing up, I was the working mom, and I really had these dreams of being able to do it all. Being the homeroom mom, being the, everything, because I wanted to be involved in their lives, but, having a pretty demanding job. And it just kind of, as you said, comes out in strange ways. And for me, it was the cookie episode, which was, call it 9:00 the night before. It's some homeroom party, which sweet little Alex comes in and says, "Oh, Mom, we're supposed to take chocolate chip cookies tomorrow. That's what we got to sign." Now, we got to sign that a week ago, but we're at 9 o'clock, at that point. So I've made the really difficult choice that many moms have to make and saying, am I going to go buy all those ingredients and make that, or am I just going to go buy them? I already made. So I made that choice and bought those store-bought cookies, and we took them. And Alex cried the whole way into the store the next morning. Like, "You're just the worst mom. Everyone's going to know they're in one of these little plastic things. So it's clear they're not homemade." And I just felt so awful the whole day. I can't remember what I was doing. It was just awful. And many years later, the kids were laughing about something. I'm like, "What are you laughing about?" I'm like, "Oh, remember that time with the cookies? That was so hilarious. We made you feel so bad. You cried. We didn't care. We got out of the thing. We went with our cookies. Nobody really noticed, but we were going to tell you. Love those kids. Love those kids."
Yeah. By the way, thank you to our listeners for checking in with us. We always appreciate you watching. If you have a moment to leave a like or a kind comment or subscribe to the show, we would greatly appreciate it. You've talked a lot about the harder lessons learned later in a career. What were some of those for you?
I think the first one that comes to mind was just when I was working with a CEO at Frito-Lay, and that was the first time I'd really kind of taken a chance outside of law.
Yeah.
And I moved into lead the HR function. And, at first you get all excited. It's a great new opportunity. It's fun. You learn new skill sets, and then you kind of get in it and you're like, I am totally not equipped for this role. And then soon, again, just not necessarily having all the background skills, and then having the CEO actually call you out on it. And, I tell this story a lot. I mean, up until that point in my life, I'd gotten really good grades and good performance reviews. And, for the most part, felt pretty good about, how I was doing.
The work you were doing, yeah.
That first year when I got not a great performance review and had a conversation with the CEO that said, "I just don't understand. I don't think you're making the transition from law to HR very well." I was crushed. I mean, I'm like, this was my first really awful moment. And and it was I felt like it was a big failure in front of a lot of folks. And, kudos to Al Carey, who was the CEO at Frito at the time. He sat down and said, here's what, here's my suggestion. This is what I'm looking for in a head of HR. And I think that was a big learning to me, is understand what the expectation is. I mean, and don't just assume just because you've seen the job done several different times that how it's supposed to be done.
Right.
So that was a big learning for me. And I take that lesson, sometimes you it sounds a bit trite, but you learn a lot from those failure moments where you have to kind of sit back and just regroup and say, am I going to just give this up and go hide and go do something else? Or am I going to, kind of sit down and figure out how to make this more of a success? So, I mean, I think that's, again, when you have those failure moments, I try to, they don't feel good, but you can learn a lot from them.
Well, sure. And I think there's this perception that really successful executives are where they are because they stay within a realm that they know really, really well. Yeah, a comfort zone, but also a zone of success.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something that's really compelling for me, and I hope is really compelling for our viewers as well, is the idea of someone really successful, finding the courage to push through failure. Like, that's a big deal.
Well, you sure do learn a lot. And then I think that also, to your point, there are people from the outside looking in, and I've seen this in just talking with folks that don't see, most everybody has a failure. I mean, I don't care how successful you are. I mean, most everybody's had a moment where maybe it was a product that they launched that didn't work, or again, but everybody has. And I think it really does, speak to how you handle that. And if you're able to and sometimes it takes a lot longer to kind of put those pieces back together.
Mm-hmm.
And you just got to fight through it. And I've watched people, that have had amazing careers really have to fight through several years of tough, maybe it's markets that they're trying to rebuild or even changing jobs, right? I mean, and so much of, in this economy today, people are finding themselves maybe in a whole different space than where they started off,
right.
And having to kind of rebuild career sets around that. But there's certainly, again, there's a lot of people that do that really successfully. And I think it really is, it's the attitude and spending that time to kind of regroup and say, what did I learn from this, failure, challenge, put whatever words you want around, but something that didn't go as you wanted it to go. What did I really learn from that? And then how can I apply that? And how do I hopefully not have to relearn that lesson over and over again? Sometimes you just do, but if you can avoid that, it makes life a little easier sometimes to kind of keep track of those lessons learned. Different people have different means of doing that. But I think because you don't want to have that I mean, you don't want to have to keep repeating the same lesson learned over and over again.
Of course. Out of curiosity, what did you said it was Al Carey was the CEO. What did he say he was looking for?
He told me that, I was trying to learn, I guess, where I felt like from HR that I wasn't as up to speed because I didn't have like a master's in HR or those kind of things that others before me.
Right.
I was trying to kind of do the book part of HR, which is like, we're going to do succession planning this way. And I would call it I was the academic practice of HR, right?
Okay.
I mean, it's like I read, when I moved into the role, I must have gotten 25 different books. Why we hate our HR was a big article back then. I'm like, thanks so much. But I was trying to learn, much like I applied in law school, right? I mean, I thought I could just learn my way into it. His message to me was, I want you to come out in the plants. I want you to go get on a route truck and talk to employees and you will learn much more about being a good HR person. Again, at Frito-Lay, over 3/4 of our employees are frontline population. And if you're not out there doing what they're doing, it's really hard to support them. And he was right. I mean, that wasn't something that was my comfort zone. It wasn't something I'd done as a lawyer necessarily. And so I just didn't, it didn't seem like it was, should be priority number one for me. But in his mind, it was priority number one. And it really, as I started accompanying him on different, plant visits and things like that, it really just changed my whole perception of what the problems were that I should be trying to work on.
When you're a senior level C-suite executive talking with people, doing work at, going out in the plant, how do you, what sorts of methods do you use to make sure you're really getting honest answers from people? Because there could be a tendency to shade things and say either to be too aggressive or to shade the truth and say, no, everything's great. Like, so how do you get the truth?
I think what I learned first is you have to have one-on-one conversations. Sometimes we kind of do the group, piece. It's really hard for people to feel comfortable to tell the truth, and you get a lot of group think and things like that.
Sure.
So one-on-one conversations, and then I think you have to get to know people first. You can't just run in and say, so what's working? What's not
the real
working?
scoop?
Right? How do you like your manager? What do you think? Right. Exactly. So you kind of start off with, tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you, what family life, interests, anything like that. Just trying to build some kind of bond. And then you can get into the questions of, how do they feel about the culture at that organization? How do they feel about the job itself? What would they change? I think that spending that extra time, and sometimes it's hard because you're very rushed. It feels like everything in life just is rushed. We're going to visit here. We're going to be, and everybody has jobs and things to do. But I think pulling away, I'd rather have 5 really good conversations with employees than talk to 25 and have very surface level. If I'm really trying to get at what's the culture in this particular location, or what's working, what's not working in terms of what we're doing. I mean, we're putting out all this training. Does anybody like it? Is it helping anybody? Right? I mean, you learn a lot in terms of, again, what you think is really effective, that you're doing really isn't effective at all. And it's kind of disheartening, but it's much better to know that than to live in your little world and go, we're doing X, Y, Z so well. And I think the employees are really liking this. And it's like, are they?
Meanwhile, they're like,
exactly.
Any other insights from your executive career?
Don't be afraid to step out and try something different. I'm an accounting major, was very by the book, right? I'm going to go this, I'm going to do that. I'm a lawyer. I mean, I'm probably as risk averse as a person comes. And you just, I think there's so many options out there today. And I think sometimes people sell themselves way short because they're like, well, I just don't have that skill. I don't have that, that ability. And it's like today, with all the learning that we have available and the, kind of just the pieces where you can get those skill sets either online or otherwise, just don't sell yourself short. I think, if I had one regret, I would have done more sooner. And kind of jumped in some other things. And as I, look at where I am in my career now, I mean, I ask myself that same question. So what's next? What are you going to, what's different? What's going to keep challenging you to do something different? So I just, again, as you think about that would be my message to folks, is just be bold and you're thinking about what you can do.
Yeah. Something that I've noticed when moving outside of my comfort zone, I don't know if this is true for everybody, but the work just goes a lot slower. And it feels like it's so hard for me because I'm used to like fast. Let's make it happen. If it hasn't happened yesterday, we're making it happen today. And if we get stressed out tomorrow, then we need to be able to explain it to somebody. But then with, running our business on the podcasting side, sometimes our social media, the social media work we're doing, it takes me 2 or 3 weeks to just get the first permutation out there. And that is kind of anathema to me. But
that's when you're growing, right? I mean, that's the piece. You don't see it till you're almost through it. And all of a sudden you look back and go, wow, but look what I can, and sometimes it gets easier the next time around. Other times you just make it, it feels like it's, I'm not much, again, we talked about me not being athletic, but I do try to work out. I'm part of what I do, the little that I do. It's like, well, that second and third mile aren't as hard now that, that I've been, but it felt like I was trudging forever at, kind of the first. So and all of a sudden you wake up someday and you're like, hey, 3 miles isn't that bad, right? I mean, again, I'm not a marathon runner. That guy, I know the limits. I'll keep punching those limits, but within reason. But I just think, to your point, just when the slogging is happening, kind of just at least give yourself credit and say, well, but am I learning something? Now, again, if you're just slogging away and miserable and you don't like what you're doing, that's a different kind of thing. If you can kind of see the end of, hey, at the end, I'm going to have this skill set, I'm going to produce this product, or, it may be as simple as this is a job I need to do because I need this job right now, right? I mean, again, people are on a lot of different places in terms of, what they're doing when they're working and what they're, kind of what's their goal and what's their motivation for that. But I think if you can find a place that even if it's hard, you still feel like you're growing and learning some kind of skill set, it's worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. You were on the boards of Prince of Peace Christian Academy and the Storehouse Food Pantry. What has been the most rewarding moment of your involvement with these organizations?
I think what I like about both of those is there are two things that I'm passionate about. And so for the school, it's about education. And it's about holistic education, right? It's not just education academically, but it's a Christian school. And I think what we're trying to do is prepare kids for the challenges of life. And so I think that's really important. And then the Storehouse I'm passionate about because I feel like it's a place that I can really use my organizational skills to give back. And, I think all of us have an obligation to give back, to whom much is given, much is expected. My father said that to me all the time. I know, again, it's something that's rang true. And I'm here at A&M, that was a value there. And I think the Storehouse and being able, it's the largest food pantry in the North Texas area. And I think what people are surprised about is in our area that there really are food challenges. We live in Plano. It's one of the most, kind of progressive cities, if you will, outside of Dallas. And just, you wouldn't think there would be those problems. And it's like, there's a lot of hidden hunger. And, we're able to kind of meet that and are working to develop a social enterprise. So it's exciting. I mean, it's something too that I see, again, as something that from the people that volunteer to those we serve, it really does. Everybody gets something from it. And I enjoy being a part of something like that.
Well, yeah. And kudos to you definitely for being involved with all of that. I saw, so my wife's parents live in Frisco. I saw a political map of the North Dallas suburbs, and I was surprised to see how blue a lot of those districts are. I was expecting suburbs to just frankly especially like Dallas has kind of a reputation as an energy city, and I was expecting more red, but I was interested by that.
Well, you just see, I mean, especially in the Plano Frisco area, we've got, all different, I mean, again, you're just seeing the changes that come in terms of the population that's there. And also, again, a lot of what you see is what may have once been South Dallas is moving north. Section 8 housing, right there, by, kind of big shiny buildings, right? And those, again, trying to meet the needs of those neighbors. In addition to, again, there's people don't think of it as much, but even further up, there's the rural poor as well, right? I mean, and then there's the people, especially coming off this pandemic, that may just be one paycheck away from finding themselves not being able to put groceries on the table. And it's not forever, right? But it may be 2 or 3 paychecks worth of. And, we saw a lot of, retail food workers when the restaurants were closed down. that were just trying to put food on the table, right? I mean, going back to work as soon as they could find jobs, but, for 3 and 4 weeks at a time, not being able to have a paycheck is a long time when you've got kids to feed and, kind of extended family members all together. So you just, again, I think seeing the face of that and realizing that, there, but for the grace of God, go a lot of people, me, others as well. And so, again, going back to that, the need to be sure that you're always given, paying back what you've been given.
Yeah, no question. What led you to join the advisory board of the Masters of Human Resource Management at Mays?
So I have to give big shout out. Ron Chandler, who now leads the program as well, when I was in the HR role at Frito, gave me a call and he's like, "Hey, I'm just going through, kind of alumni and noticed that you went to A&M. Do you hire any Aggies?" I was like, and I think it goes to just asking the question. I didn't even, again, the program wasn't here when I graduated because I'm a jillion hundred years old, but it was, so I didn't really know about it. And he's like, "Hey, I know, would you be willing to come down?" And immediately I just thought, this is a great program. And we've since then hired over 25 masters in HR students. We've got 5 this summer interning in PepsiCo that are just finished their first year here. And it's a great program. And it's been fun to meet, CHROs from other companies. I think you guys have had the Yeti CHRO on.
Yeah.
She's awesome. She's been a lot of fun. I mean, they're just a neat group of people to be able to, kind of share business issues with, especially this past year with the pandemic, everything from, are you guys going back? When are you going back? What are you doing around all these different kinds of leaves? I mean, it's a resource for the businesses as well. But I mean, again, I've been really impressed with the students and they've done extremely well within PepsiCo. So it's exciting.
That's great. That's great. You're also a big believer in the value of the A&M degree in the Aggie network. What do you think A&M has started doing recently or stopped doing recently that has added the most value for students and former students?
I think I'll start with what have they started doing. And I think they're doing a much better job preparing students coming out to have careers. I think they always did a great job technically. Like I felt like my accounting degree was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but I was prepared. And, again, I know whether it be engineering, anything, whatever your degree is from A&M, you're going to come out academically prepared. Mm-hmm. I think what we are doing a much better job of today is preparing people to be, again, holistically good, stewards in terms of the companies they work for. I mean, I think the courses around ethics, the courses around even some of the sustainability ones that they have, you're just finding people that are just holistically, I think, better contributors and really preparing them to do more than just go out and, be that accountant or be that marketing resource. How do you have a successful career? And again, I think that those probing questions and just, again, all the programs that it provides now just make you better equipped than perhaps, where we were 30 plus years ago when we came out.
Do you think an emphasis on cultivating core skills, what we used to call soft skills, is a big part of that?
I think it is. And I think it's a distinct, it's interesting. That's really becomes, it can be a distinguishing factor in the very beginning, but certainly as, kind of moving, if I look at just the people that I've seen either from my HR role or myself, the soft skills, so to speak, are the ones that ultimately can either cause you to be successful or fail. I mean, people say that all the time, but I've seen it over and over again. It's like, can you make a connection? Like I tell my kids all the time, life is a group sport. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are very few individual contributor roles. Even our great R&D scientists at PepsiCo, they're not individual contributors. They work on teams, and you've got to be able to, those softer skills of, can you communicate? Can you write? Can you
make people laugh?
Can you make people? Yes. Well, I mean,
with me, unfortunately, the answer is no.
Well, but I mean, with that comes, again, a little bit of a dose of humility, not taking yourself so seriously. I mean, honestly, learning to laugh at yourself is a really important skill set. I mean, if you can't laugh at yourself, because you're gonna screw up and do something stupid, you just will, and you may do lots of something stupid. And if you can't have a little fun at your own expense, people probably aren't going to want to be around you that much. And so it's going to be really probably pretty hard to be a leader of a group or other kinds of things.
Yeah, no question. Thanks to our listeners again for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's move to rapid fire. What do you consider your most valuable failure?
Most valuable one would be I actually had, when I moved into the HR role at Frito within the first month, our SAP conversion failed and we weren't able to pay anyone in the company for a week.
Oh, no.
And that was my first month as the HR. And the one thing you want to do as head of HR is make sure people get paid.
They get paid, yes.
Because they really want to get paid for the work that they do.
I hear that's true.
They do. And so that was tough. Learned a lot about it. Really doesn't matter that, you didn't make the decision to change to a particular payroll system it's basically, how do you I learned to accept responsibility even when, kind of ultimately it wasn't my decision because nobody really cares. They just want to know how you're going to get it fixed.
Right.
And so you move very quickly from trying to, understand how did all this happen to how do we fix it?
Yeah.
I mean, get through that root cause and then get it fixed.
Yeah. No, it's, they're just, it turns out people want to get paid. Title of the show, Kyle.
They just do.
What important truth do very few people agree with you on?
Data is not as important as people. We're a very data-driven company.
Yeah.
And I routinely say that's all interesting. But if the people can't implement the decisions or if we don't have the right people doing the job, it really doesn't matter what the data says.
Right. What is your fondest memory of TAMU?
Actually, the first time, and it's a somber one, but it was just, it told me so much about it. The first time that I went to Silver Taps. I'm the first Aggie in my family.
Okay.
So really didn't understand kind of what that was. And, kind of just what my dorm room person just said, hey, we're all going to go as a hall, and went over there. And I thought, any school that cares this much, and we were all sitting out there calling out names of people that most of us didn't know, right? But any school that cares that much about people is special. And I found that to be, and still continue to believe that that's one of the things that makes A&M incredibly unique, is just the fact that we care so deeply about our students and former students.
Amen. What habit have you developed recently that you would say has greatly contributed to your continuing success?
I've actually started blocking out time on my calendar just to think, as ridiculous as that sounds.
Yeah.
I mean, you can kind of, and I think a lot of it was when we moved to a Zoom world and people are like, oh, this is great. Literally, I would find myself on back-to-back calls because they didn't have to allow you time to walk down the hall to get to someone's office or anything like that. They just would schedule all day long. And it's like, I found myself within the day just being mentally exhausted and not being able to really tackle some of the questions that I need. So I literally am blocking out, and I'll get people like, hey, what are you doing? Like, why is that 2 hours? Can I have that? I'm like, no, you can't have those 2 hours. I need that time. And first I was like, it felt like pretty selfish. And now I'm like, I really can't live without it. I mean, because I think that just helps me regroup. And again, I think it just, if you're able to do something like that, it's not a waste of time. It really does. Sometimes you just need time to think.
I love that. Anyone you would like to send good bull?
Well, I couldn't leave without sending the good bull to, I promised, to my wonderful husband, who was class of 82. And my two kids. So Alex was 2017 and my son just finished his first year here at Mays. So we're an Aggie family, and the A&M's been a great place for us. So I'll gig them.
Gig them. Michele, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
We hope you enjoyed that conversation. Before we begin our MasterCast top 3 takeaways, I didn't know you aren't allowed to nod in a courtroom, and I feel like that's kind of silly, but what do I know? Our first takeaway for today is the concept of getting out of what I called the success zone, and some people might call it comfort zone. But as I alluded to later in the show, to me, it's really about speed more than it's about comfort. The ability to quickly know the right thing to do and execute it equally quickly, to me, is what the comfort zone is really about. Outside of that, things happen so slowly. The learning curves are often murderous, but that's frequently where the most important learning is. The most important things we have to layer on that take an employee's value from $250,000 a year to $3 million a year, that take a founder from $50,000 in revenue to $1 million. Look for the right opportunities to get out of your success zone, out of your speed zone. The second takeaway is from Michele's experience going on ride-alongs, getting out in the field, and her message was go deep rather than wide. This is advice we hear a lot, but why is it true? I submit to you that the reason is this. When you do cursory discussion with 25 people, you only have time for one real story. Maybe two. But when you go deep, you can get into lots of stories and you can start to notice the places where they intersect. And where the stories are, there's the truth of what's happening. For our third takeaway, I think Michele had some very important things to say about the leverage of short-term hardship. What I mean by that is when someone is barely making ends meet and then they run into a situation where briefly they cannot make ends meet, what happens over the next few weeks will often play a huge role in how the next 5, 10, 50 years of their lives unfold. Sometimes the effects of times like this echo far, far into the future, even for a person's entire life. Obviously, we want to help everyone, but sometimes we think of hunger and homelessness as problems that are out there rather than very close by. The moral of the story, and I'm going to throw you a bit of a knuckleball here, make a point to say hello to your neighbors. You never know just how they're doing, and even greeting them a few times a year might put you in a position to really help someone at some point. And now, I will close us with a quote for today. The success parts of life look good to others, but the best parts are actually the simple daily experiences. This is true whether you're a teacher or a waitress or an actor. I know because I've been all three. Lauren Graham, thanks for listening.